Hello, I'm Ian Dale, and I'd like to welcome you to this evening's event. And we are, of course, all here to talk about this. Eyes and Ears, A Survivor's Guide to Westminster by David Amos MP. Now, David and I have got a lot in common. We both come from Essex. I come from the posh bit. Thought I'd get that in first. And he's written this marvellous book about his time in Parliament. Now, he was first elected in 1983, as many of you know, for Basildon. And I started working in Parliament the next year. And that was when I first met David, and we've stayed in touch ever since. And he's got a wealth of anecdotes, experience, and there are lots of funny bits in this book as well. So it's not your normal sort of political memoir. So I hope everybody's going to go out and buy it. Well, tonight David's going to be talking to two of his fellow Essex MPs, Mark Francois and Jackie Doyle-Price, and I'm sure they've got some very incisive questions for him. I think you're going to enjoy this evening, and I hope you're going to enjoy his book too. Thank you.
Next month, a book which I have written called Eyes and Ears, A Survivor's Guide to Westminster will be published, part of which covers Brexit. And yes, by inference, everyone will be in the book. Would my right honourable friend agree with me that the last general election was not fought on how political parties might handle the coronavirus pandemic, but was categorically about ensuring that the result of the 2016 referendum was implemented in full? Will my right honourable friend confirm that that is what he intends to see happen?
Prime Minister. I can indeed, Mr. Speaker, and I congratulate my right honourable friend on his new book.
If you were to read his excellent book, Madam Deputy Speaker, Eyes and Ears, probably available in all good bookshops, you would be aware that he is the proud patron of the Conservative Animal Welfare Foundation and has devoted much of his life to campaigning on behalf of our furry friends.
Yeah. If anyone has any questions they would like to ask me, if they post it in the live chat section in the comments column, I'd be pleased to answer those questions.
Well, Jackie and Mark, great to see you this evening. And thank you very much for giving up your valuable time to interview me about my book. Now, did you know I'd written a book?
I knew it was in progress, and now I've read it. I've read it on. You can get it on your Kindle, folks. So it's well worth a read.
Excellent. Mark, could you tell the viewers what the book is called?
It's called, I just happen to have a copy to hand, because I did it the old way, Jack, forgive me. It's called Eyes and Ears, A Survivor's Guide to Westminster.
Fabulous. Now, look, before we get into the interview, we are three Essex MPs, are we not?
Hey.
We are.
And we think that Essex is the greatest county in the country. Is that right?
Yeah.
And both of you, for different reasons, do want Southend to become a city, don't you?
Oh, yes, absolutely.
At least it would shut me up for keep going on about it. Anyway, look, I'm in your hands.
I very much doubt it. Right.
Okay, I'm in your hands. Who would like to start the Inquisition? And Jackie, you're not Oprah Winfrey.
Well, David, if Jackie will forgive me, I thought we might start with some of the history first.
Yeah.
So you talk about the 1990 general election campaign in Basildon. And on page 90 of the book, you said, I quote, "I will probably only remembered, if indeed I am, for the 1992 election campaign." Now, I think you'll be humble there. I think you'll be remembered for a lot of things. But why do you think that particular battle for Basildon in 1992 was so iconic?
Well, Mark, look, this was a very long time ago, but I am serious that moment when the result was broadcast, not just locally, not just nationally, but throughout the world, for 30 seconds, I became famous. And the truth of that story, you know only too well, because Mark, I think you were absolutely crucial in that campaign as a very young man, but as my number one cheerleader. And of course, the Labour Council hated me so much. They had employed 100 Barclays bank tellers, told all the media that Basildon would be the first result to be declared. And so everyone, if they wanted to cover it, would see my humiliation live on national TV. And Mark, I only got wind of it when Anna Ford, do you remember Anna Ford? And Dave Dimbleby phoned me up in my office and said, could they interview me? Well, I thought, I didn't realise I was quite that well-known a politician. And that's how I actually got to grips with what they were up to. And as you know only too well, my friend, the script that they had been given went very wrong on the night. So there I was saying, go forth and celebrate. John Major will still be Prime Minister. And in 4 weeks' time, when we have the local elections, I want everyone to go out and vote Conservative and vote this rotten council out of office. And they did. Every one of the 15 Labour candidates lost. And so becoming rock solid Labour, it became solidly Conservative.
Well, David, you very kindly mentioned that I was part of your campaign, but you speak very fondly in the book about Barbara Allen, who was actually your legal agent for that election, and who I think you used to refer to as your very own Winston Churchill. What are your memories of Barbara?
Oh, I loved Barbara, absolutely loved her. I mean, politically, my mentor was Sir Bernard Brain. Sir Bernard Brain, who represented the constituency of Castle Point, was the father of the house and had the next door constituency. And he was very kind and generous to me. Well, I think because, how can I put it, he had a rather comfortable majority. Barbara Allen had been, or was his agent, and he very, very generously loaned her to me during that 1992 general election campaign. And Mark, I don't know what I would have done without her. There she was, smothered in paper, piles of paper in front of her. She was one of those people, a little bit like Baroness Trumpington, never took the cigarette out of her mouth as she was speaking to you. And she was just absolutely wonderful. I mean, she adored Bernard Brain, and we really became close friends. And I had no idea, Mark, that of course, years later, when I became the MP for Southend West, that's where she actually lived. And it was just awful that just a few weeks after I became the MP for Southend West, without being ill, she suddenly died. And we lost a very, very great lady there. And Bernard Brain gave her eulogy at St Mary's Church, Prittlewell. And I owe so much to Barbara.
I still remember the funeral. It's a large church, and it was absolutely filled to overflowing, David. She was very greatly loved, and for very good reason. On night at the counts, as you say, the world was watching, because this was the first marginal to declare. As you say, it had been set up that way by Labour Council because they thought you were going to lose. You come onto the stage for the result to be announced with a completely straight face. You never gave anything away. You never smirked. You were completely, like a poker player. What was going through your mind, though, knowing that you'd won and knowing the world was watching?
Well, look, Mark, we've got Jackie on this call, who has been a key marginal on 3 occasions, so she knows the feeling. But Mark, this is the count that was done in an hour. So you've hardly got time. Very grandly, I arrived sort of 5 minutes these days before the declaration, but there, an hour, you've got to be there before the start. And it was an absolute sea of people in the room. And we're called up onto the stage to show how it's all gone. And I was elated and numb. Julia was like that, sort of a bag of nerves. So she would have had a straight face in any case. But I actually was determined to keep a straight face, not to give everything away. But I think you're going to refer to John Major's remark.
Well, it's your book, so you tell the story.
Well, he said in his book, he was sitting on the sofa with his advisors, looking at the screen, and his advisors said, "Oh, look at David's face. He doesn't look very happy. He's lost." And John Major said, "I know David Amos. He's won." And that's the story of what happened. And Norman Fowler, who was our party chairman then, he said absolutely whooped with delight in central office. But, you know, really, if I think of Jackie's wins, which were absolutely remarkable, but in those days, the media was so different and everything was concentrated on this one key marginal. And that's why I got publicity. I mean, people all over the world wrote to me afterwards and congratulated me on winning the election. Well, I might have retained my own seat, but I certainly didn't win the election, and I'd get stopped in the street, on the tube, and all the rest of it. So that's why I said, Mark, when I'm lowered into my grave, there'd be a few people queuing up to make sure the lid of the coffin is screwed down. But I think that would probably be the main thing that I'll be remembered for.
There is a strange amount of satisfaction. Sorry, go on.
No, I'm sorry. I was just going to say it's a natural point to hand over to you, Jack. So, all yours.
Thank you. There is, David, I'm sure you agree, quite a strange kind of satisfaction from being able to confound all those TV crews that turn up to see you lose and then you actually win. And I have to say, when you do that against the backdrop of whole swathes of your party writing off as well, that's even more exciting. But let's just say that some of those people who are writing you off, David, won't have been seen on TV as much as that particular result has.
and of course, Kathy, you and I both had, dare I say, unpleasant opponents.
Oh gosh, yes.
Really unpleasant opponents.
But that brings me on to how politics has changed in the decades that you've been serving the House, because you obviously you have uninterrupted service going back to 1983, and there has been quite a significant change in both the style of how Parliament works, plus the kind of MPs that are coming along there. Big change in obviously the premiers that you've been able to support. And I guess, you know, as you reflect, and it comes out very clearly in the book, that, you know, you have some amount of sorrow that MPs are no longer viewed with the same amount of respect that they used to be.
Oh, very much so. So it's no secret that I do love the place. Now, the MPs have changed. Physically, they look different. There are many more ladies than gentlemen for when I first arrived in the House. And we look different. The men aren't dressed so formally. I have my own views on that. I think that there's nothing wrong with the uniform. I like school uniforms, and I think male members of Parliament should wear a jacket and a tie in the House of Commons.
Yeah.
Ladies, they also look different. I mean, in those early days, Jackie, you look good in anything, but the ladies wore hats. And certainly trousers weren't worn because they weren't very popular in the UK. But, you know, I don't really like to see ladies in jeans, frankly.
Oh, no.
And that's not being old fashioned, but I don't think that gives. So colleagues physically look very different. And they're also they come from completely different backgrounds, really, to when I was first elected. I mean, a bit of a joke, isn't it? The Conservative Party was seen as being full of really wealthy people who'd been to Eton or Harrow, bags of money, and everyone on the Labour side was impoverished. Well, what a joke. You know, the three of us are what you would call working class Conservatives, and we're proud of that fact, really. That has changed a lot. But you said, Jackie, about my disappointment at the way MPs were seen, because we used to be respected, highly respected. And because of all sorts of scandals, our reputation has been damaged in certain respects irreparably. And I really do regret that, because, look, I think most members of Parliament, nearly all of them, go into politics really because they want to make the area in which they live better, our country a better place. You make huge sacrifices as a member of Parliament. You don't do it for the money. It's a tough job. Your families take a hit as a result of that. And I just don't think that's widely recognised.
Oh, I completely agree with you. And if there's one phrase that's abused, it's MPs don't live in the real world. Well, you know, we've not been beamed in here from the planet Zog. You know, we have the same experience as everyone else. But I mean, you highlight the role of scandals in undermining MPs, and obviously the expense scandal being one in particular. But I think, you know, we can think about incidents of criminality from certain members going back before that. But I just wonder, and again, your healthy disrespect for Tony Blair comes through loud and clear in your book. You see, I would chart a lot of the diminution of respect for MPs to Tony Blair's premiership for two reasons, really. One is what he did to Parliament. And, you know, you refer to the late night sittings and the much more substantial scrutiny that happened before the Blair government and the introduction of guillotines and all those other processes. But also the issues of honesty, because you had a government which was so characterised by spin and management of message. And to the extent that, you know, the final act being the vote on the Iraq war, which was obviously underpinned by what were dishonest claims. And I would suggest that would be as big a contributor to the diminution of respect for MPs as things like expenses. What do you think about that?
Well, I totally agree with you, Jackie. I mean, what went on from 2007 to 2010, and I'm not going to go into it in huge detail now, but it could have been handled differently. And there aren't many members of Parliament left in the House of Commons who really understand what went on then. But the mass exodus from the House of Commons, the fact that some people went to prison, all sorts of different things happened. I don't think the House of Commons came through it the better, really. I think there are many, many things which were done and said at the time which were damaging, and it was a tragedy that it happened. But going back to Tony Blair, I mean, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown and I were elected on the same day. So I'm in a good position to judge it all. And I would think Tony Blair must, I couldn't care less if he hears about this, he must wake up in the morning saying, mirror, mirror on the wall, who is the fairest of them all? I mean, the vanity of this chap. And even now, he's filthy rich, etc. I mean, I used to get so annoyed, Jackie, when Conservatives used to say, oh, he's all right, David, he's really a Conservative. What Conservative would have broken up the United Kingdom? And it's during today, the coronavirus pandemic, we're finding out how well or not well the devolved regions actually work. He did all that. And above it all, he hated the House of Commons. Oh, he couldn't be bothered turning up half the time, really. And he certainly didn't want scrutiny. And what was awful, Jackie, because, you know, we've got lots of new colleagues now, and I think about the last two elections before them, After 1997, there were only 165 of us left. Michael Shersby, the Member of Parliament for Uxbridge, had a heart attack. We were down to 164, a tiny rump, really. And of course, Blair seized his opportunity. And that is why in the division lobbies, we only used to have 2 columns. We had 3 because it was taking so long to get all the Labour people through their division lobby. And he seized the opportunity and thought, I've got complete power like an emperor. This is where I'm going to take away the power from Westminster. And that's what he did. But that's another story. It's what he did with Iraq. Now, I don't have the military expertise that Mark has. I've never pretended I have. And our then leader went to 10 Downing Street for a briefing. Everything told me, Jackie, that this was not a good strategy if we didn't have an exit plan. And we never heard about the exit plan because you're quite right about the dodgy advisors. And I had decided I was going to vote against what Blair's proposition was. However, in a packed house, I stood there listening to it. And at the dispatch box, he said there were weapons of mass destruction and they could reach this country in 10 minutes and we'd all be blown up. I believed it. How silly was I? So I can't prove it, but I changed the way I was going to vote. And I will never, I'll always regret until my dying day that I did that, because I know things have moved on, but it brought terrorism to this country much, much more quickly than would have been the case. I mean, putting aside the IRA atrocities and all that, but it was dreadful, and we certainly didn't have a exit strategy. And yes, Jackie, I think that is the biggest scandal of all. Yeah. Never has a prime minister got to the dispatch box and lied about such a serious subject.
Of course, you shouldn't berate yourself, David, because you ought to be able to believe your prime minister. But I do think the long-term damage of that has been hugely corrosive for our politics. Before we come back to Mark with the next set of questions, I'll open the scene by saying, of course, you were elected the same day as Jeremy Corbyn as well. And I suspect you were as surprised as anyone that he ultimately became leader of the Labour Party. But also, I mean, Jeremy Corbyn, frankly, had been a harmless eccentric sitting on the backbenches with his carrier bag, hadn't he? Let's be brutally frank. And then he became leader of the Labour Party. And leader of the Labour Party at a hugely significant time when we were having the referendum on leaving or staying within the EU. How surprised were you that he came down in favour of Remain?
Well, everything about Jeremy I was shocked about. As you know, Jackie, in terms of becoming father of the house, it's how soon you sign the book. Well, I'm number 7 in length of service. Little did I know that the guy standing in front of me was Jeremy Corbyn. And frankly, when I think of other MPs like Dave Nellis, Audrey Wise, all the rest of it, he was seen as being on the extremities. No one really took him seriously. I had the odd conversation with him. I mean, he wasn't like Tony Benn, who was a towering intellect, an amazing politician on the left. And the only contact, I remember having a chat with him. I went to a grammar school. His first wife, wanted their children to go to a grammar school, and that's why that marriage failed. So I thought, there's principles on both sides there. He seems to be a principled person, but for goodness sake, it was absolutely unimaginable that someone with his views would become leader. And we all know how he became leader. And although there's a number of these Labour MPs still in Parliament who lent their vote to him, I won't embarrass them by it, but his view on the membership of the European Union is extraordinary, because he had always been against our view, our membership, and delivered umpteen speeches about it. But again, you know, his weasel words on that, on what happened with Keir Starmer, is absolutely extraordinary. So, I mean, look, there's little that unites myself and Jeremy. I support Southend United and West Ham. He supports Arsenal. But we were united once at PM's Questions, because he stood up and told Theresa May that he supported Southend becoming a city.
Excellent. That moves it nicely over to you, Mark. So, because this book actually does have quite some detailed diary entries about Brexit, but I'll hand over to Mark.
Thank you, Jackie. Well, David, if I put my hat on briefly as chairman of the European Research Group, you have a sort of Brexit diary towards the back of the book about what was going on in Parliament, which were extraordinary events. What's your overall view on the activity of all those members of Parliament who paid lip service to adhering to the result of the referendum, but then spent the best part of 3 years doing everything they possibly could to actually undermine the result?
Well, Mark, that was by far and away the worst Parliament that I'd ever served in. And I thought the leadership, it was just crackers what was going on, frankly. And to lose our majority in the way and under the circumstances that we did was unforgivable. So we returned to Parliament with no majority, and it was just horrendous what went on. Now, I'm not going to bore our viewers with my views on the European Union, but my track record is I voted no in the first referendum. I accepted the result. We were slaughtered in it. Never thought we'd be given the opportunity for another vote. I was shocked by the result, Mark. I didn't think we were going to win 52 to 48. We can argue about how we did, but that was the result. And if we believe in democracy, it should have been delivered. And for a number of my colleagues who stood on the manifesto, proud to be Conservatives, to absolutely railroad our strategy in the way that we did, and then leave the party, set up alternative organisations, was absolutely disgraceful. And it did no good whatsoever to the public perception, because going back to what Jackie was saying about the public's perception of Parliament, I think we were made to look ridiculous during that time. We did absolutely nothing. And then that's why I did the diary, Mark, because I wanted to record the daily, weekly fiasco that we went through. It was a horrible, really, really unhappy Parliament, with the votes on the deal, no deal, and all of that. And unfortunately, Mark, it led to bad feeling between colleagues on our own side, great animosity. And I never thought I'd see people losing the whip who held high office, but they did. That didn't do us any good. I mean, what youngsters who might have been thinking of going into politics would have made of it all, I do not know. But it was a very, very sad time. And regardless of how you voted, Mark, I think you should accept the will of the people. And that was the will of the people. So I think parliamentarians who stood in the way of the will of the people, it was not a good look at all. And look, although I personally didn't enjoy campaigning on election day on the 12th of December, 2019, observing people's Christmas decorations and all of that, I hated every minute of it. Wow, what a result. And when I think that Jackie, who didn't get the best result in the country once, didn't get the best result twice, she got the best result 3 times without the just recognition, and you, Mark, and your wonderful troops went over there to help her. Absolutely fantastic. And now, crikey, she rivals you and I with the majority she's got now. So how good is all of that? So, yeah, Brexit was a disaster for Parliament. So thank God we've now, I hope, we're in a position, although I'm not entirely happy with what's going on with fishing at the moment. But that aside, I think we can draw a line underneath it all and look to a bright new future.
Dave, thank you. You talk a lot in the book about the growth of what you call professional politicians and people for whom career advancement seems to outweigh almost any other consideration. Now, I think you say in the book there have always been people like that. But your argument is there are far more in Parliament than there used to be when you first came in. Why do you think that change has occurred?
Well, look, Mark, first of all, colleagues might look at me and think, oh, he's not the sharpest tool in the book, he's of no account, etc. But I do know about people. Before becoming an MP, I interviewed thousands of them, so I know what makes them tick. And why on earth Conservative associations pick some of these people, I do not know. What do they believe in? I mean, it's as if you give them a script and they'll talk to the script. That's not what I want. I want people who actually have profound beliefs. And dare I use the word convictions. Now, the 3 of us are conviction politicians. It may not go down well with people, but we are. And that is why I would never forgive people for what happened to Margaret Thatcher, because there I was in a difficult seat, but she had convictions. I had convictions. We won an election with her. And I said, look, we've got to stay with her, even if I go down the tube, because I'm loyal and I just want to stand by the convictions. But some of these people we have today, I'm going to offend them. But it's nice if you've actually had a job that isn't just being a researcher, isn't just running someone's parliamentary office. I mean, worry about the bank balance, worry about teaching children, worry about medicine. I mean, look, the expression being in the real world, but I do think we need more people who've lived in the real world. Now, look, we've got all these new colleagues elected. We've not had a proper parliament since the general election because of the coronavirus pandemic. So we don't really know them. We only know them on Zoom and a tiny bit. We're just getting to know them. But my God, there seems to be a competition as to who comes from the worst background. You know, we'll have Edith Piaf in the background, dancing the Dutch or something. So there's clearly been a bit of a change in the Conservative Party. So I think, Mark, we need a cross-section of what makes up our great nation in Parliament. Very much a cross-section. But I hate the career politician who, before they've even been elected, wants to be bloody Prime Minister. I mean, for God's sake, walk before you start running. And being a minister, both of you two, as far as I'm concerned, were highly successful ministers. But what about also being a member of Parliament? What about representing the people who actually sent you to Parliament in the state? How bloody arrogant it is that you just think, oh, right, I've done that, I'm elected, now I'm going to go off and pursue my parliamentary career. No one really has a career in Parliament. And I tell you this now, it doesn't matter what office you've held or who you are, once you're no longer a Prime Minister, a Minister or a Member of Parliament, it's incredible how soon you are forgotten. We have a very, very short shelf life, really. And it's actually surviving in Westminster, which is somewhat tricky. And my goodness, I've been lucky to have survived for nearly 4 decades as a Member of Parliament.
David, my penultimate question is about Westminster itself, the building and the palace. Some bits of the site itself 1,000 years old. We have the so-called restoration and renewal programme, you know, to decant us for up to 10 years, which you express a lot of scepticism about. My latest understanding is it's going to cost £500 million just to then produce an estimate for what the rest of the work is going to cost. So it'll be 500 million, if you like, to give us a quote. And you've expressed a worry that if we leave the palace, we may never come back. How realistic do you think that threat is? And what do you think we should do about the restoration and renewal programme now?
Mark, I've survived through being an optimist. Our speaker, Lindsay Hoyle, I think, shares my reservations about the situation. Now, I know you shouldn't be in love with a building, but I do love the building, every facet of it, however old-fashioned it is. But when I was on the administration committee, you name it, I've been to the top of Big Ben, I've been all over the building, down to the bowels. And I'm not going to argue with people that there are fire hazards there and it does need a complete overhaul. But you, Jackie and Mark know only too well that there are many politicians now who do not like tradition, whether it be trooping through the lobbies, the way we call one another honourable, right honourable members, the pageantry, they just don't like any of these things. And to them, the building isn't fit for purpose. They couldn't wait to get us out of the building and to be in some ghastly sort of without character edifice that would become Parliament. You know, I hate to suggest that where the European Union Parliament is or where the Scottish people meet. You know, I just don't like the buildings. I think the mother of parliaments is very precious, and it can't be beyond our wit that we, the elected members, House of Lords, it's a different matter. There are too many of them, as they themselves admit, and they're not elected. I think they could move out if that happened without a fuss. But for elected members of Parliament to leave Parliament, the Palace of Westminster, it's not on. And I think, Mark, when they talk about us being out for 10 years, well, although I'm only halfway through my career, I may not be there. Well, no, you will be there, but there'll be many members of Parliament who won't return, frankly, to the building. And I think it's a complete non-starter. So I hope that restoration and renewal is on a different path. And I hope we, the elected members of Parliament, we might have to move office while the work is going on, but we have to think of the cost. And I want us to stay in the Palace of Westminster.
Thank you. David, my final question, and thank you for letting me participate on this. And for the record, I really enjoyed reading the book. Your own restoration and renewal. You just said you're halfway through your career. So I think Churchill did 60 years in the end or something like it. Now, as you said, as Jack has alluded to, I think you've done 37 years continuous service. So you're, I think, the 7th longest continually serving member of Parliament, which means, providing, God willing, you remain in good health, you are on profile, as they say, to one day perhaps become Father of the House. So I don't want to tempt fate for you. But do you think that's a possibility? And if you ever were to get that honour, what would you do with it?
Well, Mark, I have 5 children, and that in itself is a huge responsibility. Now, being father to 649 colleagues, with the way some of them are, could be a challenge. Look, I never thought, Mark, when I was elected in 1983, that I would still be here. I really didn't think it. The average lifespan of members of Parliament in terms of being re-elected is 8 years, 8 to 10 years. And once you get past that, wow. So to have survived so long and to even be thinking about being father of the house would never have occurred to me. What would you say, Mark, if I told you that my secretary has a special job? She's on health watch for the 6 colleagues in front of me. She's constantly monitoring their health, any announcements they might make. I mean, look, the bonus of being father of the house, Mark, is you get called first. And at the state opening, you get to lead everyone down to the building. There's marvellous things like that. But look, Mark, my life really hasn't been entirely planned. Although I always wanted to be a member of Parliament, but it's not been a smooth course always. But what a thrill that is for someone to be father of the house. But I'm not going to bet my life on it, Mark. We'll see what happens. Eric Forth,
David,
Eric thought I would.
David, we wish you all good luck in that. So that's a perfect segue to hand back to Jack to round us off. Jackie.
Thank you, Mark. Well, David, as you've alluded to earlier, many of our professionally minded political colleagues are constantly in the race for the next job. But I would completely endorse your point that to serve as a member of Parliament is perhaps one of the greatest honours that we could ever experience. And just going back to your journey, you are an East End boy. You became elected as the MP for Basildon, and then obviously now for Southend West. But really, you are perhaps, you are very much in touch with the people that you've represented all the way through. You share their heritage. And in that sense, it's almost instinctive to be able to represent them. Whereas I think many of our colleagues tend to be like weather vanes rather than leaders, and very keen to follow the herd. But you've perhaps proved better than most just how you need to be in touch with your constituents and reflect them, but not necessarily just jumping to the demands of your inbox. But to what extent do you think that constituency work has changed in the 37 years that you've been a member of Parliament?
Oh, it's so different. There I was with my secretary sitting at a golf ball typewriter, banging out the letters, because you received letters which would take 3 or 4 days to come to you. Now, through the internet, everyone wants an immediate response to whatever the issue is. They don't wait a day, they want it within the next few minutes. So people in that regard have been much, much more demanding than they used to be. I also think the mystique about contacting your member of Parliament has gone, really. People now contact you about everything. Dare I say, they contact you about things really which your local authority has got responsibility for. So I think that has changed completely. The other thing that I've noticed is that, as a former health minister, I actually deal with many more issues where people have mental health problems than I used to. And of course, when someone's got a mental health problem, they need your time, which we don't always have. You can't get it in a sort of 10 or 15 minute slot in a surgery. They need more and more time. That's changed a lot. And the other dramatic change, Jackie, is people's lives. They're much more complicated than they used to be. I came from the East End where there was sort of strong family units and everyone helped each other. Well, now relationships tend to be transient with children left in the wake. And of course, people want the state to come and support them. So I think the role of being a member of Parliament is very, very different. Jackie, when I started, you needed real skills in the House of Commons to hold your own. When you stood up, there would be people looking to intervene, very, very clever people. and the speeches were very detailed. Now it's how you look, dare I say, on Zoom, with the mouth as mine does, go up one side. How you look, how the hair is, presentation, and all of that. The skills have changed really dramatically, and with it being a member of Parliament. But at the heart of it all, it's about people and their lives. And whether we're Conservative, Labour or whatever, we're there to try and, regardless of how they're voted, try and help them with their lives. And I know that is very much what motivates the three of us.
Absolutely. And I have to say, the obsession with getting a good 30-second Twitter clip is just dumbing down our politics horrifically. I'll go further as well. I mean, I actually really resent...
What's Twitter?
Exactly. I really resent these orchestrated email campaigns by some well-funded pressure group with a series of demands, because that actually gets in the way of us actually helping our constituents, doing the job that only we can do. And as you quite rightly say, it's not our job to be investigating non-collection of bins. That's what your local councils are for. But that's another subject for another day. We will one day restore the role of a proper role of a member of Parliament.
Yeah.
But one of the things I'm glad you do, David, is you continue to do the traditional role of member of Parliament extremely well. You are an extremely powerful advocate for Southend, as you were for Basildon before. And with that, you've managed to sustain very good relationships with organisations that do need your support. And I was very, very pleased to support the work you've been doing with Endometriosis UK, due to the fantastic work of your constituent Carla, who, despite being, actually having quite big difficulties with this illness, has an immense amount of energy to push forward this cause. And I'm pleased to say that we're making some progress, aren't we?
We are, thanks to your support. Look, Jackie, although I've got 4 daughters, I didn't know what endometriosis was. But when Carla Cressy came to see me at a surgery to explain it, that's how it all started. And I do recognise that there are a very large number of ladies suffering from this particular problem, and they need our support urgently. And I'm glad now that we're educating more and more colleagues about endometriosis, and the government is beginning to focus on giving them support.
Yes, it's as many as 1 in 10 women suffer from it, and it's underdiagnosed massively, despite it being an extremely disabling condition. But actually, you'll find that the NHS and the Department of Health is extremely negligent of things that only affect women. But some of us are trying to do something about that with your help. We do need the support of our men. So everyone watching this, do investigate endometriosis, because it's a very debilitating illness. But you've also got other causes that you're supporting, and I've supported in the past as well. There's quite a long list of them. But the Music Man project, that's going to be a beneficiary for this book as well.
Oh, well, thanks to David Stanley, who's just an extraordinary person, who, as a teacher, strongly believe that the power of music can transform the lives of these people. When I go back to my early days in your area, in Ockenden, going to South Ockenden and seeing people in straitjackets, my goodness, how it's changed today. And people didn't spend the time bringing out their different characteristics as they do today. So the Music Man project has enriched the lives of a huge number of people in the 3 of our constituencies, so much so to see the look on the faces of their family and friends as they performed at the London Palladium. Then they went on to the Royal Albert Hall. And if it hadn't been for the coronavirus pandemic, we would have been over to Broadway, but we're going to get there. So thank you for reminding us of that, Jackie.
David, on that, I was at the Royal Albert Hall that night. I had the privilege of watching the Music Man project in action. I defy anyone not to have moved who was there that night. I mean, it really left you with a sort of tingly feeling. They were that amazing. And like you, I hope they get to Broadway when conditions permit. And Jackie quite rightly has highlighted some of the proceeds from your go towards that and endometriosis. Then perhaps as a man, I could highlight the third charity, prostate. And that they do great work. Obviously, from a male point of view, that's one of the biggest cancers that unfortunately takes the lives of men. And I remember Una King suffered from endometriosis and was very brave about relating her experiences and how debilitating that could be. So I'm 101% with Jackie that we need to raise the profile of that and research more into it. But equally, we need to do more to fight prostate cancer. So it's wonderful the third in the troika, as it were, of charities your book is raising money for is for prostate, the third. And maybe you want to quickly say a word about that too.
Well, again, Mark, this was inspired by a local resident in Southend who suffered from this illness and was able to get the therapy treatment that wasn't widely available, and it saved his life. He's become a pioneer now for trying to encourage us men to be a little bit more aware of ourselves, and dare I say, ladies are, Jackie. They say, my wife, my goodness, when I think what ladies have to go through, I think we're more fortunate. But yes, Mark, that is the other charity that I'm any proceeds from the book will go to. Well, look, I want to thank both of you for the time you've given this evening.
It's been a pleasure
To interview me.
Absolutely.
Oprah Winfrey and Michael Parkinson. I've got to tell you, by the way, this book isn't it. There's already a second book.
Excellent.
And a third book on its way. I mean, the book that people are really going to be interested in hasn't been done yet, because there are all sorts of things politically which will be revealed, but I don't think I could just do it at the moment. It would be a little bit tricky. I don't have enough money, frankly, to engage those sort of rival lawyers. But there is much more to follow. But Jackie and Mark, thank you for your friendship, and thank you for giving your time this evening. And thank you to you.
Sorry. I was just going to say, it's been an absolute pleasure, and we wish you all the best of luck with book 1. And we look forward to whatever book 2 is, you big tease, and then book 3. But as they used to say on the 2 Rockies, it's good night for me and it's good night from her.
Oh, thank you, David. It's been great. Absolutely enjoyable.
Bless you. Thank you, Jackie. Bye, everyone. And thank you for viewing. Bye.
This is my journey so far. Where I was born, where I became a councillor, when I was first elected to Parliament, and where I am now the Member of Parliament for. Enjoy my journey. I hope you enjoy reading my book, Eyes and Ears, A Survivor's Guide to Westminster.